Welcome to this episode of Abide in Me, How Jesus Models Secure Attachment with God. This series is a survey of the Gospel of Mark, looking for how Jesus models what is now called secure attachment, which is the physiological, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual experience of what is often called salvation or regeneration or being conjoined with God or enlightenment, individuation, even becoming spiritual. Through the series, we will discover the benefits of becoming securely attached with God, which is the transformation of one's life into one of joy and satisfaction. So we continue in our survey of Mark chapter 6, and the apostles then return from their trek across the country, and they report to Jesus all that they had done and taught and seen. And so Jesus realizes we've got to go off by ourselves and have a quiet time and rest because the people were just coming and going all the time. So they get into a boat in the Sea of Galilee and row away. But in the story we're told, people saw them leaving, and so they just ran along the shore, following along. Perhaps they could see the boat out in the sea, I don't know. But they ran ahead, and so they were waiting for Jesus and the apostles when they arrived in this wilderness place where there was nothing else going on. And Jesus sees this, and we're told in the story, his first thought is compassion. His first feeling, his first reaction is to have compassion on these poor folks. They must have been really needy, right? Well, sometimes people are really needy, right? Perhaps you have been needy. Isn't it a wonderful experience when a loved one gives you what you need? A hug, an uplifting word, a look in the eye? But then there are times, perhaps too often, that we don't know what we need. I may have some inner, undefined, insatiable requirement that actually creates anxiety, which then I project onto all those around me, and I appear to them as, in a negative sense, needy. Everyone has experienced such times of wilderness. It is being dependent on someone or some circumstance outside of myself to feel peace or security or joy or satisfaction. That wilderness state is a threat to my life, to my happiness, to my wanting to pursue life at all. And it can be running along unconsciously in my life, and so I might act in a negative way to other people because that action actually reduces my discomfort. But I'm not noticing what I'm doing to my relationships. I may be confused about what is the right thing to do or say. And so then I end up just saying what will satisfy that moment. And too often that may be arising from some part of me that's defensive or egotistical or even shameful, something I want to cover over or hide. And that behavior will likely harm my self-esteem or will certainly distance me from someone else. This is a hunger, right? It's something I crave, and I will seek it, consciously or unconsciously. When I'm thirsty, I seek drink, right? When I'm lonely, I seek friendship. When I'm in despair, I seek emotional uplift, hope. Sometimes I satisfied those needs in merely temporarily satisfying ways. Sometimes I will drink a sugary, artificially colored water, right? And that will satisfy in the short term, but it's poor nutrition. Or I might reach out in that vulnerable state to just anybody who's standing there, a person I don't know, and that'll end up harming me. And sometimes I will simply bury my sadness or anger or fear, and so hobble myself in my journey. It's being emotionally lost, cognitively unsure. I don't know where I am. I don't know where I want to go. I don't know what direction to choose. I wish I was one of 100 sheep, right, following the herd, listening to the familiar whistle of the shepherd, right? Then I would know where I am and where I'm going. I might be exhausted or confused or skittish, but when I hear that shepherd's call, I find energy to move. And so that's what happened to these people when they heard Jesus' voice, when they saw what he did. My experience is that I will go seek safety from harm, shelter from this storm, good food that will nurture my soul. Imagining this metaphor in my life promises to connect me to the ancient human condition that is pictured in this 2,000-year-old story, which is continuing to today. Likely there are even older versions of this same story about the human condition in other literature from around the world. The people now across Galilee had been visited by the apostles of Jesus, who taught them truths, who awakened a hope of health, of safety, of happiness that was actually possible. He healed their bodies and their spirits. In the process, they had become true apostles, the bringers of wisdom and healing. And so the people followed them to the Master, and there manifested all their neediness, driven by hope and trust. Their despair, their hunger, their wish for a better life or freedom or joy was encouraged to find and follow Jesus. So when they saw Jesus and his apostles take off in a boat into the Sea of Galilee, they jumped up and it renewed their energy to go have their needs satisfied. They followed along the coast because they needed to hear his words, to touch the hem of his garment, right? To get food for their souls. This pictures our inner spiritual experience when we are energized by the hope of a connection, of a secure attachment to a loved one. We do both healthy and, sadly at times, unhealthy things in order to follow this powerful draw of our need for connection to that safe, nurturing experience. As I read this story, I was amazed, right? That is, when we read this story, our poorly developed, ego-filled, judgmental self is amazed that Jesus is not annoyed at being followed. We're told that as he stepped off the boat, he saw what turned out to be more than 5,000 people there waiting for him. He was not going to get the rest that he said they all needed. He did not get time alone with the closest of his followers to encourage them. What he saw now from his secure attachment way of being was a crowd of people who were like lost sheep, needing love, needing wisdom, needing connection. They did not know where they were spiritually. They did not know how to find the food for their souls. In this powerful moment, as small as it may seem, stepping off the boat, what Jesus does is a confirmation of my premise that Jesus had grown spiritually to become an integrated person, that he is secure in his sense of self, his worth, in his connection. I suggest that Jesus knows the human spirit because he's also been in this emotional and spiritual wilderness, and he knows how to get out of it. He knows that we are all driven to find sufficient, healthy food for our spirit so that we may feel joy and satisfaction, because that is what he has found. And he knows that when needy enough, we will accept almost whatever we find, poisonous as it may be. And so he looks and he sees these people and he has compassion. Now, perhaps when you're needy, you eat, right? Perhaps you sleep. Perhaps you yell. Perhaps you fight. When we are not being led by truth and wisdom, we inevitably get lost in an undefined, unintelligible morass of emotions and unregulated thoughts. That's the 5,000 and more people. Jesus knows that all these poor choices are cries for connection, to be seen, to be heard, to be accepted as we are. And so when he looks over the crowd that has chased him down, all he feels is compassion. So, taken as a story for us, our opportunity is to remember that authentic spiritual wisdom and love that will guide us to healthy relationships is being modeled here by Jesus' behavior of this way of being. The task is to look carefully at what Jesus is doing and expect to see a way to find relief and safety, a way to come to expect good results by how? Offering compassion from a secure attachment to people and ourselves and our God in our lives. As Jesus stepped off the boat, any irritation he must have felt would have been very fleeting. He stopped projecting his neediness on the people. He didn't need their affirmation for his own sense of safety and worth, right, and value. And so quickly, compassion is stirred up in his heart. The miracle that is about to then happen is proof that his model works. Because we're told then it's late in the afternoon, the apostles see these crowds and they say, it's getting late. These people need to be sent away to find food and places to stay. And Jesus says to them, you feed them. And the apostles say, with what? We've had to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people. We haven't done that. How much could we possibly do for these people, right? That's their normal response, right? I mean, that would be an expected response, that we don't have the economic ability, we don't have the infrastructure to do it, right? And that's when Jesus said, well, how much bread do you have? Go find out. And they came back that amongst the 12 of them and their other followers, I guess, they had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Not much even just for them. So then Jesus says, we're going to organize this. Have everybody sit down in groups and bring me the bread and the pieces of fish. And so then we're told that Jesus does a miracle. It says he blesses the food, and then he breaks the loaves into pieces and the fish into pieces, and he just kept getting more and more and more to the disciples. And they went and spread it out amongst all 5,000 people and brought back extra that was left over. An amazing miracle. I want to read a long quote from a book called Person to Person, The Gospel of Mark by the Reverend Paul Vickers. But follow along here with me because he makes this really important point about how we make the mistake of relying on ourselves or the world or circumstances to give us an internal experience of satisfaction and joy. He writes, we have to realize we are dealing with human things in all these day-to-day problems and emotional stresses. Today, every problem is often summarized in economic and scientific terms, and these are assumed to define, therefore, the action that is to be taken. The human element, the humanity of it all, if it is admitted, must be bribed or coerced into the solution offered. But the real question is that of human intention. The will to do anything helpful remains the decision of those involved. They must use the bread and fish of the love and wisdom they have from God to decide what must be done for others. Even where we cannot explain all the factors involved, the motivation for loving service must feed our life. Each of us has very real decisions to make on how we use our abilities and our time, how we react to other people and their needs, what purposes we use to direct our daily life. The crowd of problems may seem vast, but the only way to satisfy them is by personal action from love, wherever we see the opportunity to help others. End quote. Whenever we take a moment to stop and notice, we will see that there is a huge crowd of ideas in our minds, each one begging to be fed, each one wanting to be attended to become healthy and strong and stand out amongst the 5,000 ideas in our mind. It can be a disorganized mass, and we may have experienced poor management in the past, right? Hurting a friendship, covering up a mistake, telling a lie to get a desired result. Jesus entices us into an experience of the power and effectiveness of love to organize and serve all those ideas, producing good results. He's telling us that if we depend on the spiritual love and wisdom we are given from within, from above our thought, our minds will be well organized and will get the emotional and spiritual food each needs. Well, how do we do that? The apostles are symbols for the actually good and actually true feelings and thoughts that we have acquired. Yet, we are merely natural-minded people, and when confronted by a large and difficult problem, we can easily default to the, quote, economic and scientific solution. Most often the ideas we have made up, and they've seemed to work for us in the past. They were effective. We default to the feeling that is most comfortable, avoiding feeling disrupted, or discovering that we're being selfish or egotistical or materialistic in those solutions. An example might be that my partner and I see differently how to discipline our child who has misbehaved. We agree that the bad behavior needs to change, and that will feel to the child like being punished. But we each have a different set of ideas about how to effect it. In order to show my partner the right way to do it, right, I might resort to dire predictions. Our child will die, right? Or I might assert my rightness. Look, I know how this works. This is the right way to do it. Or I might even call out my partner's past failures. When you've been treating our kid that way, the behavior is continuing. These ways of acting, of responding, will just feed my ideas and make them strong and satisfied. But the food that I've been giving myself is merely materialistic and selfish. It's sourced in my own ego. And so my behavior will wound my relationship with my partner, leading my partner to not feel secure in our relationship. And it will not model for our child any secure attachment. So Jesus is modeling what a person who has a secure attachment style does with challenges that need to be solved. He responds to the apostles' proposed solution of sending the people off by engaging them in the work of an authentic ministry which relies completely on the power of divine love. So, going back to my parenting story, I can stop and realize that no one person, including me, has ownership of all the good and true ideas about parenting. But I do have something, and I might misjudge that as not being enough. And what I have is that I love my children and I love my partner. I do not need to go to another village for these resources. When I bring that love out and put my actions, my thoughts and feelings into the flow of the divine love and wisdom, remember Jesus blessing the bread and fish, then my mind and the thousands of ideas that my partner and I share will be organized and fed by a divine love flowing from within, coming into my consciousness, precisely because I'm acting from a love for my children and my partner, and specifically not from my own ego, or my need to be right, or even my experience and expertise, which is so great. And the impact will be miraculous. Our parenting will be strengthened and deepened by the shared effort that tapped into God's love. Of course, there's still the issue of our parenting effectively, but we will be together in the struggle. Yet another result of being securely attached with each other. So I want to remember to catch myself when I think to look elsewhere for inspiration to solve problems. I want to hear the inner voice of the divine asking me, "What do you have?" And Jesus is showing us a way to be in healthy relationships with others that resolves our worries and wounds by encouraging us to discover how good desires and true ideas are available to us when we go within to the spiritual sources for our ideas and our reasoning. So to prepare, I invite you to ask yourself, with what? That's the question the apostles put to Jesus. With what am I going to solve this? When you reflect on it, you will likely remember a time you caught yourself wondering, perhaps even out loud, I don't know how I'm going to do this, cope with this, overcome this. This is when it feels like the world is giving us a burden or pushback or barriers. It feels like we're in a wilderness. And our faith may start to tremble and may wonder, why is the universe doing this to me? And our trust in the source, in the flow of goodness and wisdom, might be challenged, at least with confusion, if not with doubt. So our practice of letting go of our ego, letting go being judgmental, sets us up to respond to these challenges by first going to compassion for ourselves and for others. And we will hear in our mind and in our heart, go find out what you have. Explore your inner resources. Be curious about what's going on for those people. And hope and insight will then follow. If we marshal our love and wisdom, it will be multiplied. Surely enough to do what needs to be done. I pray this has supported your transformative life, whatever practice you have in your life. I want to thank Solomon Keel for his music, and I want to invite you to make a contribution to this work if you wish and are able through the PayPal link. And I invite you to continue to listen to the next episode. You be well.